How do you think the show's looking so far?
Pardon? I look at it, it's looking great. Really good. Really good.
No, I was saying earlier, we've had really good feedback from like the prior few things we've seen about and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, I think it looks really nice. So I don't know, it's kind of different, like I'm talking to normally just the artists and stuff. But this shows slightly differently, so I don't know if you wanted to just say something about how you put the show together and why you asked Robin and Gary.
Well, they're both artists that I've known personally and through their work for a number of years. And they both have a very improvised approach to their work and create these very sort of complex structures in different ways that I thought would really interact well together. Particularly, they seem to both have a kind of open-ended approach to creating. Like they both want sort of moments, both want to approach a kind of certainty in their work, but they both seem to suggest that if that certainty was reached sort of with too much finality, that would be false. So they both have this sense of, from both within an individual sculpture and an individual painting by either of them, and within their work from painting and from year to year, that their work's in this constant state of evolution and development. And I thought the different speeds and the different ways with which that kind of constant change, that constant sort of transformations are occurring within their work would make a really interesting combination.
Yeah, I mean, which it has, it was kind of at the end of day one of the curation stay. And I mean, is this kind of what you imagined it would look like coming together at the end of day one?
Yeah, I think when I first thought about showing their work together, it was probably a few years ago when it occurred to me. And at that point, Robin was working exclusively on the floor. All of his sculptures were stood or laid out, expanded, did whatever they did on the floor. And since last year, he's been suspending his sculptures from the ceiling, or some of them at least. And part of the reason, sort of trivial, but at the same time quite important reason, that I thought Linden Hall would be a good place to show their work is that it was obvious to me that you would be able to hang at least some of the sculptures, so either from the beams up here and through the sort of contraption that Robin has made to hang them.
Never done before.
No, but coming to the gallery before, I realised obviously you've got the great light for Gary's paintings, but the ability to hang Robin's sculptures. And it was sort of the thing I said in my text, the thing I was looking forward to most was to seeing how the two interact in the space together, how the hanging sculptures and the paintings, they're much more sharing a space with each other. One thing that's really striking is that throughout the gallery there's this quite beautiful light. There's a lot of light which really brings up all the colour of Gary's paintings. And all of Robin's sculptures I've seen exclusively in his studio, which is a almost sort of windowless space lit by artificial light. And what's been really interesting is, one, seeing the colour of Gary's paintings come out in the light, and two, there's a sort of double thing in Robin's sculptures, which is that on the one hand you can see them much more clearly because of the light in here, because of the space that they've got in the gallery compared to his studio. But also that, particularly with Gary's, in sort of dialogue with Gary's paintings, the light in the space sort of acts as a contrast, particularly with the denser sculptures, like the small one we've got hanging up here. You've got this beautiful light-filled space, and then you've got this very dense, dark sculpture. And I think the contrast is really interesting. The sort of this nice light-filled fairly old building with these sort of quite brutal sculptures which also do have their own sense of delicacy, as obviously do the paintings.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying earlier, when you first look at them, they are very aggressive pieces with dangerous aspects to them, but they do hang very beautifully and gently, just lightly, weightless in the air.
Yeah, and with Gary's paintings, there's always not always, but it's a common thing running, well, maybe always, going through the work, that there's this distinction between that he wants to get a sense of lightness and a sort of detachment from the physical, but he needs to assert weight and he needs to assert the physical to give you that sense. There always has to be that contrast, and so having that contrast in dialogue with the ones that run through the sculptures is really, really interesting. I think quite exciting.
When you went to the studios to select the work, you had to think what would work in the spaces, and then also what would work with each other. Was that the kind of process you were going through?
Yes, to some extent. I think I mainly thought about them when I was selecting the work. I was mainly thinking about the two groups of work separately. So we knew, because of the limitations of hanging or of the size of Robin's floor piece, that they had to go in particular positions in the gallery, and so we selected them based on that. So there's a smaller hanging piece upstairs, simply because there wouldn't be enough room to have one of the larger ones.
But it's interesting, like you said earlier, even though they've been brought out of the studio now, which is a smaller space than this, they seem much bigger here than they did before.
Yeah, it's really, I suppose there's in the studio, I'm not sure why that is. Possibly it's because in the studio you're focusing in on the individual piece. There are quite a number of different pieces hanging, different pieces that you're looking at. Whereas once you start to get them out and you're thinking about how they activate the space in the gallery, you're much more conscious of how they fill that space. I think they really draw. One of the features, and it's also a feature of Gary's painting, is that paintings are not just an image that you look into. They're a presence in the room. They affect their surroundings in a different way to a sculpture, but they do, and they bring the sort of space and the light of the surroundings are brought into the painting, and they're brought into the sculpture in different ways. So yeah, I think that's been really exciting.
No, it is. As we were saying earlier, I think this is one of the most exciting shows as a gallery we've managed to put together. We're really appreciative of you. Everyone who's worked on it, put it together, and I think it looks fantastic, and I think a lot of people will cover.
Well, hopefully they should do.
It's very important. Yeah.